AI assistants are there's a little bit various different types. So there's the layered, there's the decentralized, there's the centralized, and there's kind of like the message pool. A lot of what you see AI assistants in the form of B2B and B2C nowadays are usually layered or centralized.
All right. We'll kick it off. Welcome, everybody, on this Friday morning or afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. And thanks for joining us on Valentine's Day. Um, Very excited today for our community session, for our AI Product Manager community session at Product Management Exercises. We've got Kasey Fu, who's going to be talking about the future of AI, AI co-pilots for product managers. So he's got a pretty exciting presentation set up for us. I also wanted to let everybody know, I don't know if you've seen, but we've got a new course that's coming out on March 10th, and it's learning how to build AI agents. It's building AI agents, multi-agents, deploying them, and no coding required. It's a 2-week course, and it'll be led by Corey and Kai, who teach our AI product manager course as well. So we'd be very excited to have you, and I'll post the link with details in the chat here. And without further ado, we're very excited to hear from Kasey. Kasey, I'll pass it on to you.
Perfect. Thank you. And welcome everyone. This is we're gonna kind of go into a session mainly on first introducing kind of the AI world as we know it, so the business landscape, how that really works, and then go into more of a product management lens. We'll probably be diving into various different angles, including just how AI assistants really work, and then how that really kind of translates into how we can become better AI product managers. The whole concept of an AI PM is really kind of still getting revolutionized and still getting experimented as we speak. So that's something that we have to kind of just be aware of and conscious of, but something that really does spread a lot of excitement, so to speak. So really excited to be diving in today for all of this. So again, just kind of we're gonna kind of quickly go over the agenda and the about me section. So just a quick introduction about myself and how I kind of run things as a PM. So I'm currently an AI product lead at Planview. So I run a kind of a AI assistant for Planview, which is a B2B enterprise software company that we focus on strategic project management, portfolio management, value stream management, stuff like that. We have an AI assistant that sits on top of a lot of our platform software. So that's kind of what I've been working on over the past year and a half. Prior to that, I was working on the Bing AI platform. So essentially kind of figuring out what to do with 40 billion URLs every single day and how do we wrangle the data, how do we process it, how do we filter out bad and good content, how do we categorize all that content with traditional non-transformer models. So that was kind of the pre-LLM time. So before that, I graduated from the University of Waterloo. I did a lot of kind of hackathons near the Waterloo area. Did some hackathons, including ones at Hack Harvard, which we luckily won with a lot of opportunity there. I also like to write a lot, so I like to kind of keep a fiction novel going. I also like to keep a product management based newsletter going, and I've referred to product management exercises in a few of those product management related articles I publish on Medium and my own little newsletter website. I also like to do some community building, so I run the product management chapter of what we call PM Hive. So it's a community in Vancouver, and I also like to kind of co-organize other Vancouver tech related events in the city. So that's what I've been up to. Okay, enough about me. Obviously, I think you guys, everyone kind of here came to really understand how product management and AI really converges. So we're going to go over that first. The agenda is going to kind of look like this. So we're going to go over the business world so that we just set the context into what exactly it looks like. I think it's really important for a lot of people, especially those who are not really aware of how AI works and how it's truly revolutionized our economy today, to just get that lens so that all the other concepts make a little bit more sense on why we do things. And it also sets a little bit of precedent on just calmness and reduces a lot of the unknowns and anxieties that come with, an AI that's really seemingly revolutionizing our entire world as we know it. And then we'll go over to some of the use cases from more of a PM lens. So you can kind of see in the second half, we're more diving into a product management lens about how we can all become better PMs as well as just better AI enthusiasts and thought leaders when it comes to the space. And then finally, what we think is going to happen in the future. So, quick kind of overview here. Gen AI as by itself is an incredibly large market, right? So you got The 2024 global market for Gen AI is based on Statistica's already hit about 184 billion US dollars. And that's already up by 50 billion in 2023. So we're growing exponentially, and I predict it's probably going to be even higher in 2025, obviously. Um, 92% of all Fortune 500 companies have adopted Gen AI at some point, whether this is them building their own Gen AI assistants or products, or building the GPT wrapper, or even just trying to leverage existing third-party or open source solutions in their workflows. So this is even basic things like just trying to get employees to use ChatGPT or Claude or stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And then it's projected to hit about $826 billion in 2030. And by 2032, a 1.3 trillion USD market, which, if for those of you who want some comparisons, is almost the same exact yearly GDP of Canada. So that's definitely speaking of sorts. And we're seeing a compound growth rate, obviously, pretty high. And over the next 5 years, I want you to kind of take a look at the right-hand side, which is some of the other more traditional yet also innovative industries that we thought were going to explode. And they're still growing, but they're definitely being overshadowed by this whole Gen AI play that's definitely surrounding us. So biotech, video streaming, and renewable energy are areas where we think that AI can also help grow itself and complement, but also it's just getting obviously it's getting overshadowed by a lot of the stuff that we already see in the Gen AI space. So now that we know exactly what that market looks like and why that market's so huge, let's quickly look at essentially what kind of exists today from a status quo perspective, as well as like just some high level stuff. So on the middle kind of column here, or the left-hand side column, you're going to see like what we call classic AI ML is what I like to call it. This is stuff that's mostly just non-transformer GPT models. So this is stuff like, for example, like convolutional neural networks, MLPs, a lot of the machine learning models that, in order to achieve high precision, high recall, a lot of PMs and AI data scientists like to just use judge validation to just get a lot of crowd judging to determine whether or not one thing is A or one thing is B, and help them decide on a model from that case, using a lot of retroactive data and historical data to train models, which isn't necessarily the most reflective of future things. And obviously, it's not self-content generation, which means it doesn't have that power that generative AI really does. So a lot of classification models there. Now, on the flip side, on the right-hand side, generative AI kind of blows everything out of the water, at least in some use cases, while we know that like classic A and ML still has good applications in today's world. But on the generative AI side, we see like transformer models. So this is your classic, GPT-4, Claude Sonnet 3.5, Claude Haiku, and Gemini, Grok. Um, and a lot of like the various different LLM models or transformer models that we see a lot of the big tech companies building themselves today. So and a lot of kind of like the different types of Gen AI models, autoregressives, variational, autoencoders, GANs, recurrent neural networks. Some of them obviously like kind of different content than others. Some of them focus more on the text side, some of them focus on the images side. And then the text to image products that we see today, like Dolly, Midjourney, if you've ever used kind of Microsoft Bing, I believe it's called Bing Designer, or Images, image generation, you've probably used some of those models. And so yeah, a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff incoming, as well as even video generation, which is absolutely exciting. Obviously also costly, so that's something that we'll also mention briefly, but just a kind of high level snapshot of exactly what's going on here. One thing you'll notice is a lot of the various different software companies, either B2B or B2C, are already pushing their AI products into your face. So you're going to see ads on Microsoft Copilot. I'm sure you've probably seen some ads. I'd be surprised if they didn't try to push it out to the Super Bowl. You're going to see, like, if you use project management tools today as a PM, for example, like Jira, Asana, GitHub Copilot, Notion, you're already going to be seeing like they have AI assistants that help with various specific use cases. Um, Whether or not those use cases and those kind of automated task workflows are truly valuable is subjective, obviously, because each PM and each persona has their own way of doing things. But really, what I'm trying to emphasize here is like every large organization that has some sort of project or product management tool or even just productivity tool has an AI assistant. So definitely, it's important to try to play catch up, but also at the same time, experiment with whether these tools really work for your workflows or not. And obviously on the bottom right here is Planview Copilot, which is my AI assistant. And so now that we've kind of established that, let's go into a little bit more of the technical details. We're not going to expand on the technical details of how an AI assistant works too much because really what I'm trying to provide you here is more from a product management lens of what you truly need to understand and how use cases actually work based on what's under the hood. AI assistants are there's a little bit various different types. So there's the layered, there's the decentralized, there's the centralized, and there's kind of like the message pool. A lot of what you see AI assistants in the form of B2B and B2C nowadays are usually layered or centralized, which means that you'll usually be able to interact with some sort of chat interface, provide that question, and then there's a specific orchestrator or router, so to speak, or broker that dissects your question and determines which specific bot or what we call AI agent to handle your query or question, to speak simply. And it can get quite complicated because there are a lot of AI systems nowadays that are following what we call agentic workflows or agentic systems. So please do, call me out if I'm using the word agentic too much because that's already being overflown in the space. But really, it's just to describe exactly like how these bots are interacting with each other and how these AI agents are able to interact such that we're providing a very sophisticated answer to a complicated question. And of course, this is kind of more so like a timeline of where we're at with a lot of the interfaces. So chatbot again, we had chatbots before Gen AI became a thing, but they were obviously incredibly simple. They were a little bit more on the static side. And then we discovered what RAG, which means retrieval augmented generation. That is a technique for AI assistants and agents to be able to analyze a specific load of text or content, so to speak, in a very short period of time such that it provides that content to the AI system and then provides the AI system answer to the user, whoever asked. So, you can specifically RAG a document that you've uploaded or a PDF or a PowerPoint or an Excel sheet. It'll look at that data. It'll quickly analyze the text, provide that text to the answer to generate. So that's why a lot of copilots or AI assistants, you leverage that technique in order to support you with a specific way to look at a particular document or specific policies or specific methodologies. And again, that expands into what a copilot is today, which is like kind of like a whole system of different use cases that AI assistant can provide you. And then finally, the really big goal here of a lot of AI assistants is to really start automating specific workflows and tasks. So they're going to try to discover where the gaps are in your current workflow, where you're spending a lot of time in, where you're wasting a lot of time in, and trying to automate that for you, which is by far the hardest thing a lot of AI product managers today face, is just discovering where those gaps are and really pushing for that to replace what they've traditionally been doing. So just kind of an under the hood lens there. This is a little bit more on the technical side, but essentially on the right-hand side, you start this workflow from the right-hand side, you're seeing like any sort of user interacting with an AI assistant is going to give the AI assistant a prompt. So you're going to see here, for example, if you're using Microsoft Copilot, it could be, hey, based on this Word doc, summarize the content or create a marketing pitch for me, right? So the AI assistant is going to start taking in that content. It's going to talk to its orchestrator. So that's going to be the first agent that it's going to be talking to with the content. And it's going to talk to itself and say, okay, let me look at the content company data via the RAG technique and then generate that content based on what's needed from the agents and then provide that to the user. So you're going to see here that it's going to look at the agents. It's potentially even going to look at various different databases such as knowledge graphs and vector databases, which might have the content. Now, if we're talking about just like a Microsoft Word doc, it's most likely just going to look at potentially a text to SQL or potentially just like a specific basic agent that reads all the content or rags all the content on that document screen. It's going to take that content, it's going to provide that back to the orchestrator. That orchestrator is going to make sense of all that data and generate a very basic user-friendly answer for the user. So just to describe usually how copilots work, it follows a very simple technique that obviously with a lot of like complicated nuances and differences, but at the very base level, a lot of AI systems nowadays that you see in today's market follow that sort of framework. Just another kind of graphic to describe how complicated an AI assistant system can be. So again, industry context, there's conversational agent, that's the orchestrator. There's the contextual output, that's what it actually generates from the outside lens, what you as a user see. But from the backend side, on the left-hand side, is like all the stuff that's going on. So you got structured and unstructured data being fed in, got a knowledge graph with like a lot of business context that gets combined with the unstructured and structured data. That gets all fed and interpreted by the agents. So the agent does the heavy lifting, provides that content with the industry context and all that stuff to the orchestrator, and the orchestrator tries to generate that output. So this is a little bit more of a harder diagram to really dissect and understand without a lot of time and effort. So we're going to kind of move on from there. But this is something hopefully that I put in near the end of this kind of section here, just so that you have a better understanding. So now that we kind of have an idea of exactly how the AI assistants work from the back end, let's understand exactly what the landscape looks today. So first thing I wanted to just kind of show you is that there's a lot of different organizations that sell mainly just AI agents, right? So like if you're a product manager and you're for, let's say for example, a company that's trying to either adopt AI or you're trying to build your own AI product, you're most likely interacting with agents. So agents are kind of like the heavy workforce that's powering the backend side of an AI assistant. It's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Each AI agent will be kind of designed to perform a specific task or responsibility. And the way that you can build AI agents is so easily, readily nowadays. Like you have Amazon Bedrock, you have VoiceFlow, you have Microsoft Azure AI, powered by OpenAI, you have Vertex AI from Google. I'm missing a lot here, obviously, but the whole point is there's so many different platforms and infrastructure pieces that allow you to either experiment with your own AI agents or build AI agents or just um, explain to you how other AI assistants that you're using today are getting powered. Which brings me to my next kind of piece here, which is the basically kind of the whole upbringing of vertical AI agents. Now, vertical AI agents have really sprung into popularity over the past year because of first we started exploring what AI agents were, how those things worked, and then now we know exactly what vertical AI agents are, which is essentially an AI agent that's very tailored and specific to a certain use case and designed in such a way that it's only able to optimize for that particular use case. Every AI assistant will most likely have multiple different vertical AI agents. Like examples could include one AI agent that could generate a very, very solid email for you. Another vertical AI agent could be performing a text to SQL on an Excel or CSV spreadsheet that is able to interpret all that information, provide that to you in a list format or table format. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. As you see in this kind of spectrum, we see the top right category quadrant is where we hopefully want to continue seeing a lot of AI agents play out with, it's an agent. There's a lot of sophistication with that agent, which means that it's able to do something incredibly hard for a human to mimic or, a human to build a bot to mimic. And then it's able to do something with a lot of high domain specifics focus, which means that it's able to kind of almost create a barrier for itself so that, a lack of competitiveness and entry for other AI agents to really replace it because it knows so much domain expertise and knowledge. And so the vertical AI market is already a 5.1 billion market today. It's going to soar to 47.1 billion as an estimate based on AIM research, but potentially exceed 100 billion. So I actually think it might even be even more because the way that AI agents work today is that each agent is being tailored and designed for a specific use case or task or responsibility. And who knows exactly where, and there's the discoverability of those AI agents is still being worked on today. And so who knows exactly, where we're going to need AI agents in our daily lives or work productivity lives in the future. So that's something to really kind of consider here. My next kind of piece here is to just let you know that really nowadays, from a PM landscape, anyone can build a Copilot. There are so many different tools and infrastructure pieces you can use to build your own stuff, but not all AI assistants are created equal, which means that, again, from a PM lens, it means you need to understand the business landscape of your market, you need to understand exactly what the traditional domain looks like outside of any AI involvement. And once you know that, you'll be able to understand, have a clear idea of like where AI can actually impact positively on where the specific use cases you feel like could be optimized. So for example, like there's industry specific scenarios. So there's some examples there, like market research, business requirements. So let's say, for example, like you could leverage AI to save a particular business X amount of time or money, just by automating a workflow that might take like a traditional user 3 or 4 hours to complete. Um, and there's also like a focus on personas and use cases. So the next graphic on the right here of this slide, you're gonna see there's kind of like three categories I've noticed a lot of AI assistants focus on. There's productivity tools, there's business and work tools, and then there's just like entertainment and leisure. So some examples here, productivity tools like ChatGPT, Notion AI, Microsoft Copilot, and Grammarly. Grammarly, as we all know, like has their kind of integrated AI such that it's able to provide an enhanced mode of being able to rewrite, fix grammar, fix your sentence structures, generate content. Business and work tools, I mean, stuff like Zapier, Airgram, Reclaim AI. My product, Planview Copilot, goes into that mix here because we're essentially having an AI assistant sit on top of an existing business work tool. And then finally, entertainment slash leisure. So this is, if I show here, like character AI, Oh, I believe this that logo that you see there, which is like kind of like really just fun stuff that you can play on the side. You know, generate your own video game characters of AI, have two video game characters talk to each other, have a very fun video game character, leverage AI to talk to you, stuff like that. And obviously just like fun content generation or a voice, which means like you're able to like take a voice MP3 file, make that such that one of your favorite celebrities is talking back to you using AI with the same voice. Now under the hood of that AI landscape are tools that help companies build AI assistants. And that's a whole separate market. That is a whole market that without this market, the whole world of AI assistants as we see it from the outside shouldn't be able to exist at all. So this is stuff like agents as a service, streaming for AI-enabled analytics, platforms such as Azure AI, AWS AI, Google AI, like the Gemini stuff, and then frameworks. So this is stuff like LangChain, potentially even like other pre-built libraries that you could leverage to build large language models faster or run local LLMs faster. And so this whole market has its own section of different things. So number one, we have platform slash infrastructure stuff. Um, Number two, we have third-party tools and systems that help with some sort of technique or some sort of task in the entire workflow. It can be anything. And then three, we have like very use case specific things that aren't exactly building, but potentially might be supporting you build something else. So on the platform slash infrastructure side, we have again I'm sure you probably recognize some of this, especially Bedrock, AWS Bedrock. We have OCI, generative AI. We have Gemini from Google. With Azure. On the third parties tools and system stuff, we have LangChain, OpenAI, Hugging Face, and then on the use case specific tools, we have Pinecone, which is more kind of on the streaming and kind of like the data index for like being able to index a lot of data for specific AI use cases. So there's kind of just like a whole large market there for people to really kind of explore and realize that there's like a whole adjacent market under the hood that's powering the AI market that we see today. Okay, so kind of the rest of these slides, we only got a few more to go, but really this focus is basically now that we know the business landscape, we know how like they work under the hood, what the landscape looks like from like an actual compartmentalization standpoint. What are those use cases and how do we become better PMs based on what we know about AI? Number one is definitely like understanding the customer pain points and the problem space pretty super well. And I'm sure I probably highlighted that previously is that like you have to question, will this disrupt the current user flow of your current user or market? And will it actually improve them if you try to integrate AI in your product? Um, Large language models, as much as they are powerful and they're creative and they generate fast content, they might potentially might be a little bit slow depending on what model you use. If you have a lot of different agents at play, then suddenly like the generation response time is much lower, or sorry, much higher than what you would expect, and versus like you just as a user you doing it yourself, right? A specific task or technique. What's feasible? So like for example, like what AI techniques are feasible today versus like how high level in how in as we like to call it PM fantasy land, it's like where AI can really land us in that PM fantasy land. And then finally, failing fast and experiment. So try to go in the right directions, but you have to move fast with large language models. So if you have like a hypothesis of a specific use case that you think that AI can do really well, suddenly go and track that down, double down on it, ship it to, a production or do an A/B test, see if it sticks with your customers or use cases. So just some examples here. Like one of my favorite building tools for websites is Netlify, and Netlify has integrated AI in such a specific way. Their niche is just looking at the diagnostics if I run into a build error when I'm building a website. And that's a very specific use case, but I use it on a daily basis whenever I have problems. It's just looking at the code and the entire, build code, and it's just giving me a quick summary in like 4 lines of exactly where the problem is. So that's like a really key example of like where the customer pain point and the problem space has already been defined super well and crisp. And it's a very niche thing, but they're doing it incredibly well. So like, yeah, why did it fail? GitHub Copilot again is like endpointing. So that's a little bit more on the expansion side because there's so many different use cases with GitHub Copilot. But some of the things that it does well and it helps save a lot of our devs, even at Planview time, is like auto importing libraries, adding filler code to front end stuff like React, bug fixing, and unit testing are some of them. Um, we sometimes use Power BI, and as we know, we have Microsoft Copilot sitting on Power BI, so we use that for report generation, and that helps a little bit too. And then finally, Planview Copilot, so which is our Copilot. We have a slide that talks about how Planview Copilot really works, but essentially, like we have an AI assistant that looks at all the project data, the tasks. We try to, support rapid onboarding for Planview products with our AI assistant. We also try to use the AI assistant to be able to like read hundreds of rows of data and discover anomalies or try to validate the integrity or the validation of that data, so that you as a user, like for example a PM using Planview products, wouldn't have to spend 2 or 3 hours doing that yourself. So those are some examples, but really the key thing, the theme of this entire section is understanding how hard it is to discover key use cases or killer use cases, so to speak, and doubling down on them the moment you find them. So I'm kind of really driving the theme and section of this slide by really focusing on the fact that AI is super cool, right? And we have a lot of really interesting ideas of how it can really revolutionize our products, the way that we already do work as a PM. But optimizing for value is always key. And by that, I mean like looking at the various different ways that you think that AI can help, various different use cases, key scenarios, and whatnot, and just moving fast to finally find that optimal value, which is somewhere in there, but it's going to take some time to figure out. And so I just kind of wanted to show you exactly how Planview's done it. Our journey, and me as the main product manager for Planview Copilot, has also been challenging, but also rewarding. Planview Copilot itself as an AI assistant, I'm just going to show you a slide of like what it looks like today in our Planview products. We had no idea what these use cases were going to be. So what we did was we started off with just a few hypotheses, and then we would go and do A/B testing, or we would just push these hypotheses into production with a small early access set of users and just see whether or not people use them or not. And then we'll have very, very close interpersonal customer feedback sessions talking about whether or not those use cases were useful. For example, we have like a Scrum Kanban board called Agile Place. So that's one of our products. We have an AI assistant, that's Planview Copilot, sitting on top of our Scrum backlog. And one of the use cases is just simply like bulk editing all the tickets in that backlog just by interacting with the AI. And that so far has turned out relatively well, but we've also discovered that we have to kind of double down those automated task and workflow use cases. So that's just kind of an example of like us taking the time to really figure out that that is a use case that might potentially help our group of users using Agile Place. So again, generating emails, that's another use case. Discovering anomalies in the data. So like, for example, like, hey, this data falls out of a pattern or is an outlier compared to all the rest of the data. Do you want to take a look to make sure that's the right thing? That's something that a lot of humans miss out on, right? So we leave that to human error. depicting historical changes. So, for example, if you have a whole Scrum backlog board of tickets, but you don't know what's changed in the last week, suddenly you can just ask the AI assistant and it'll tell you, oh, someone changed this ticket A in the last week. Someone also changed this ticket B within the last 2 days. Take a look at it. So that's a really powerful tool for a lot of PMs to just know exactly what's going on and who's changed what, so you can keep up the speed with the team's like tasks and activities. There's content generation, obviously, so like generating reports based on the data it has access to. And then finally, just like personalizing and tailoring the chat to the persona at play. So for example, like if a user is French speaking or Spanish speaking or Portuguese speaking, suddenly we can try to make the AI assistant only talk in that specific language with all the above other use cases at play as well. So now that being said, our journey at Planview Copilot, working with Planview Copilot, has also been difficult. Finding value with AI assistance is incredibly challenging. Um, what we discovered was that because we have so much data at play, we needed an AI assistant that would be able to process all that data and tell all of our customers exactly where, potentially there might be an anomaly or like where the data might be incorrect at, or you need to fill this out because it's empty. There's an empty field, a data field. And so we call that the needle in the haystack discovery use case. Another thing is obviously, again, content generation. So just generating a project template and then you getting to fill it out yourself, but you get to maybe save 30 minutes by not having to write that template yourself. Help and guidance. So this is basically like if you're using something like Jira, right? Like we all as PMs know what Jira is, but Jira has a lot of features and stuff that we just don't bother with 80% of the time. Suddenly we can use an AI assistant that we can interact with and ask, hey, what does this feature really do? Are there examples you can tell me that would provide me value by using this feature? We do that with Planview Copilot as well. Diagnostics, so that we don't do that necessarily with Planview Copilot, but something like GitHub Copilot does that obviously by looking at your code, all that sort of stuff. And then automated workflows, which is what a lot of AI assistants are trying to push into. Is just like saving you space by getting an entire workflow, like an entire set of tasks or responsibilities um, done for you. Let's say, for example, like 9 a.m. During your 10 a.m. Stand up or sprint call with your meeting or a Scrum meeting with your developers, you have to provide a report on the usage of your product as well as like what the team's been working on. So why not, instead of taking like 2 or 3 hours of finding that content yourself manually, you just ask the AI assistant to do that for you 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. every Monday morning. So that's another example there. And again, this is kind of like another graphic that shows you just how much I like Netlify's implementation of an AI assistant. Because again, if you're trying to use Netlify to build a website, but you're failing, so you're running into an error, there's a simple button that just says, why did it fail? Right? And you select that, and the AI assistant just looks at all your build code and just tells you like, hey, this build failure is not due to errors in the build process, but due to NPM warnings. So you exactly know what happened, and it saves you a lot of time. I think this is probably the second or third last slide, so kind of bear with me here. But this is talking about how important it is for the persona to be in the picture. Not all AI assistants are created equal, as I mentioned before, which really plays into a picture with the persona. So I'm going to use, a very, very kind of childish example here, but a very simplistic way for a lot of users to understand and PMs to understand why personas are important. Let's say, for example, we're looking at Ash Ketchum as one of you know is like one of the most popular fiction characters that we all knew as growing up as child. Um, Now the use cases basically recommend me a Pokemon team that can make me a Pokemon master, right? So like let's pretend that we're trying to talk to an AI assistant that would supposedly generate us a Pokemon team that can allow us to become a Pokemon master. However, that's not the right use case to try to tackle because that is a very vague question. If you're asking a Claude or ChatGPT or some sort of a large language model that type of question, they're probably going to hit back at you saying like, we don't know enough about you. We don't know about what your challenges are. We don't know about what types of Pokemon you want. We don't know if what your focus is. We don't know what the definition of a Pokemon master is either, right? Um, so what you really need is to provide all that information to the most specific level of details you can based on the persona. And so here, this is an example I'm providing you is just analyze all the gym leaders and suggest why moves and abilities my Pokemon should learn before I go fight them. So suddenly you're being more specific with your prompt, based on the persona. That allows the large language models to like basically look at all the gym leaders, all the Pokemon weaknesses and strengths, and get a database and get a contextual knowledge graph that allows it to look at the knowledge graph and then generate an actual answer that's most optimized for your problem. So it's going to look at the knowledge graph. It's going to perform retrieval, augmented generation on that content. It's going to give you a specific answer based on all that content, based on the persona. So again, somewhat of like a kind of like a very simple and fun little anecdote on how personas and problem solving with product management in the AI space really helps out. Okay, so to kind of end this off and wrap it up, we're just going to talk about the future here. There's two main areas that I do feel like a lot of its industry and its economy is going to blow up and become incredibly important because of AI. Number one, and I'm sure if you're in the AI space and your head's down trying to build an AI product or using an AI product, it's security and costing, right? So like we know we can leverage Moore's law and we know for a fact that as years go by, the machine learning models, the large language models become cheaper and faster to use. GPUs become cheaper and faster as well. However, the whole market's still worried about costing as a whole, and cybersecurity is a big thing. Um, at Planview, we get asked half the time whether or not Planview Copilot, our AI assistant, retains and is trained by customer data. And we are like, no, obviously not. We're just using an API, right? We're processing your customer data and then we're resetting the whole large language model. But that's not what people realize. So, and a lot of customers are just saying no to AI completely. So, not using any third party AI source unless it's their own because they don't know how that data is going to be utilized from a training and security perspective. And so, again, it's projected to reach about 60.6 billion, the whole AI cybersecurity space in 2028. That's a massive market. And then again, because of security and costing, I think the excitement of AI will probably tailor off to specific applications. But really, the importance of educating all of our customers from a PM lens and educating all PMs, so to speak, is about how security and AI converge and how, AI is secure and about building products that support AI security is a big thing. And again, the second piece is just substance over style, which means niche use cases are going to provide the highest likelihood of getting impact out the door for your customers. And so again, I do think that you need to look at nuanced and small integrations. You're going to be noticing that there's an AI assistant that does the most niche small use case on a day-to-day basis for you in the coming years. You're going to get an AI assistant that helps determine whether or not, let's say, for example, East Asian recipes are specifically good for your specific diet. You're going to look at an AI assistant that's able to completely groom your backlog, but only for features or tickets that are tech debt, right? So there's a very specific AI agents that are already in the play that do very specific things, but do them really well. And again, just kind of putting that out there. This was already on one of the first slides, just showing you the 1.3 trillion USD market by 2032 seems to be a real possibility. The future is a very big, again, use case focused market. You all have seen kind of three triple Venn diagram that a lot of PMs see, which is like business viability, discoverability, which is like usability, and then also desirability. And what we see here is obviously a lot of PMs needing to land their ideas in the middle. Like usability, it doesn't disrupt the traditional user flow. Like it doesn't make it harder to use an AI assistant, right? To enhance a user's productivity. There has to be some sort of business value to it, which means that users are willing to pay for it. And you need to be able to be profitable with this AI assistant. And then third is in order to discover those use cases, you just need to rapidly fail fast. You need to test, you need to find that product market fit through fast iteration, through experimentation, through A/B testing, through having these hypotheses and just running through these hypotheses as fast as you can. So if you've read Marty Kagan's inspired book, there's a lot of theoretical practice in terms of like iterating and hypotheses validation from that book that we're really trying to apply in the AI world nowadays. So again, to finish off, the lessons for PMs are big, right? So number one, failing fast, experimentation is key. test the hypotheses constantly with A/B testing or other techniques that you know. Observe the market and research what works, which means look at exactly the domain of that market, try to become a good domain expert in that market, and understand where the gaps lie that LLMs or Gen AI can really help fix. And again, that even though I know like a lot of startups don't necessarily have the tooling and infrastructure to perform A/B testing, a lot of startups are in the AI space, right? And then a lot of startups are failing fast and iterating on their specific hypotheses and use cases. So definitely use that technique to your advantage. Always prepare for better and faster LLMs. Like if you're building a system that's only leveraging AWS Bedrock, it's not necessarily making it easy for you to be able to like, fall back with a fallback plan. Try to be LLM agnostic, which means your platform or service that you're PM for should be able to leverage any sort of large language model. Because one day, like for example, let's say one day Gemini's, a large language models might be faster than GPT-4 or GPT-5. Maybe that might be faster than AWS Bedrock's Claude 3.5. And it moves really fast, and there's a lot of tooling in place that we just don't know will suddenly come and revolutionize the space. So definitely try to be prepared. And finally, I think it's probably the most important and one of the biggest lessons we've learned at Planview is a lot of hand holding is needed with customers. So this is being interpersonal, this is going on customer calls and really going into the details of like what their problems are, whether or not they really used it, trying to educate them on how the AI even works and how they really use it for their productivity and workflows. And I think that should be it. So that's kind of like the 5 lessons and takeaways that we're kind of finishing and capping off here. And thanks again for coming to our conversation today and about how really Gen AI and the product management landscape can make you a better AI PM. And I'd love to connect with you and answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Kasey. That was a very insightful presentation, and definitely learned a lot. And thank you for sharing your experience at building an AI assistant at Planview. For everyone who's joined through LinkedIn, if you post questions in the chat, I'll pick them up there and share them with Kasey. For anyone who's live, you can either and live that in Zoom. You can either post your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll take the question from the floor. Just to kick it off, Kasey, you did get a question during your talk about on LinkedIn whether or not you can give an example of a product in the cybersecurity space. A very specific one.
Sorry, just to repeat that question, it is whether or not I know a product in the cybersecurity space or my experience building one.
No, can you give an example of what is a product in cybersecurity space? The exact question.
Ah, there are a lot of different products in the cybersecurity space. There's also different dissections of cybersecurity as a whole. So there's crypto cybersecurity, there's IoT cybersecurity, there's Web 2 cybersecurity, there's AI cybersecurity. Every cybersecurity space will have its plethora of different tools, self-serving platforms. Some ones that I know of, like for example, the crypto cybersecurity space, there's CertiK, which is a company that I actually used to intern for. They do a lot of services, and they're a platform that does a lot of auditing for mainly crypto or currency companies and crypto-based companies. Other cybersecurity spaces, there's even a startup like they call. So one of my friends, they work for a cybersecurity company called Sticks Intelligence. That's mainly kind of like a both on hands hybrid approach where they help with a lot of, again, a white hat auditing, a lot of cybersecurity protocols that helps with, looking at your specific IoT or product-based solutions and your data, doing a good audit of like what is, whether or not you're following all the protocols and the policies, or even shipping a product that does automates that for you. At Planview, we have a cybersecurity team that works with third-party sources and third-party teams that does auditing for us. And then there's also like kind of actual security-based companies that look like, for example, do antivirus, anti-malware types of services where, like, say, for example, even stuff like McAfee, right? Which looks at the specific data that's in a desktop or OS, and it's going to look at specific data that's whether or not it's a virus or not, and it's going to compute that with various different machine learning models or classification models. So just some examples of like what cybersecurity looks like today. And definitely I feel like that's a very underrated space that it's only going to get bigger because of new applications like AI.
Thank you, Casey. We've got another one. It's research says that there is an AI confidence gap in the small business space. How do you bridge that barrier? So the question is essentially, and they've posted it a different way. Essentially, how can small businesses embrace AI due to financial constraints, fear of failure, or data limitations?
We have that exact same problem at Planview. So with we're constrained with the amount of data we are able to look at, especially from like an API perspective. Obviously, you have budget constraints and you have the amount of people working on AI, and then you don't even know exactly where to start with like what's the most optimal AI use case, right? So what I do recommend from my experience is obviously like starting with your scope as small as possible. So like for example, what we did was we looked at a scope of only one product out of all of our products at Planview first. And then we just looked at a small set of use cases that we had the highest confidence on potentially providing some sort of value. And what we did there was we shipped it and we immediately went to our customers. It's incredibly important to involve your customers in the conversation as early as possible, obviously. And I'm sure a lot of our PMs know that's one of our best practices as a PM. And doing that would allow you to be able to reward a higher chance of failure, obviously, with your hypotheses and use cases, but also like with the fact that your scope is small, there's a better chance for you to be able to like prove that AI has something to work on in the business. If you're trying to get the business to adopt AI in the largest scope possible, suddenly, if it fails, which there's a higher chance it will, our business leaders and thought leaders might have a more or rather less risk tolerance to it. So starting small and working on a small scope allowed us to be able to prove better viability and kind of prove better trust to our customers at Planview. And it's also helped just convince leadership that we can iterate and expand the scope in a very agile way so that we continue building on what's already good and then helping that understanding what the adjacents possible are so that those adjacents also have high likelihood of success.
Thank you. We've got a few questions on LinkedIn, and we've got one in the chat. I'll share the next question. I assume if I needed to use a foundational LLM model for one of my enterprise Gen AI use cases, and I don't want my organization's data to be compromised in the process of building RAGs or agents, do we download the LLM, host it in private cloud environments strictly offline? If this, how do we start? How do we keep up with the updates to foundational models? And can you please elaborate on how it works?
Yeah, so downloading and trying to process a local large language model on your local machine is an option for sure. And I do recommend it. If you don't have any proprietary barriers, do try that. The only caveat here is that a lot of proprietary information, including customer information, usually if you're following like a policy such as SOC 2, it technically does not prevent or it prevents you from being able to download customer data onto local machines, right? You always have to keep it in production. You can never let that download and go into like offline hands. And so take a look at that first to see if you're able to do that. If there's just like sample proprietary data that you're able to test with, I do recommend local machines would work. However, that is a point of failure, right? So if your local machine suddenly doesn't work anymore and your production-based product is leveraging a local machine-based large language model, it's not really the recipe for success either. So if you're doing testing and you're just experimenting, that's totally okay. Um, but if you have a production-based model and you're not doing in-memory based products, suddenly it's probably better to use a cloud-based solution for your large language model. So what we do at Planview is we use AWS Bedrock for our agents. We keep all customer proprietary information in the cloud, obviously in production, and we never download it to offline machines. That's not allowed, and we don't really run anything locally. But we do use local large language models just for testing, just to experiment and see like, oh, is this model faster than this model? Is this model more accurate than that model?
That's interesting. You got a thumbs up from the person who asked that question. Um, we've got a few from LinkedIn, so I'm going to read through those. But this is an interesting question: is what is the best innovative implementation of AI you've seen in a company, service, or product? Perhaps someone
Besides,
might.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just
So
gonna say you might need to
besides
think about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I've already highlighted Netlify quite a bit in the presentation there, and I want to mention that again. While I also, I can definitely talk about a few other products, but Netlify does it really well in the such that it hasn't disrupted its traditional workflow in its product, right? You don't see AI being shoved in the entire homepage. You don't see AI as the first thing that forces a customer to do. Because right now we're in a stage where we don't necessarily know that AI can help solve everything. It can help solve small specific scenarios, right, for very specific use cases really well. And what Netlify does is like when you're building a website in that portal, it just has a small button saying like, hey, if you run into diagnostic problems, use this AI to will help you dissect the problem. And I've seen that implementation incredibly well. Another implementation I've seen relatively well as well is just simply like when you're using Microsoft Copilot and using Power BI generation tooling, right? If you use Power BI for any sort of data wrangling, data report generation, even just for a dashboard, um, Microsoft Copilot has various different agents that probably do some sort of text to SQL analysis on that Power BI data and then helps you generate reports in such a simplistic way. Now, obviously, like not all customers and users are going to find value out of that. It's super subjective. But for those who do use Power BI and need reports uh, to showcase their leaders or managers or bosses or their teams through Power BI, leveraging Microsoft Copilot in that implementation in a very specific niche way. I see a lot of value from that too. So just kind of a few off the top of my head. And obviously there's more. Like I really like Notion AI's implementation of AI as well because they haven't disrupted the traditional Notion workflow. Like I'm sure a lot of PMs here know what Notion is. It's a productivity management tool that we all probably love using. It's super seamless and usable, user friendly. They have implemented Notion AI in such a seamless way, such that it's introduced in a very natural function when you're doing workflows. Um, so that's another example out there.
Thank you. Just a reminder for those on Zoom, you can also raise your hand or throw questions in the chat. We continue to get some in both channels. Um, One right here is as a product manager, um, how will I manage the accuracy, latency, and cost in today's competition of integrating LLM in app? Because every day a new model is going to be launched with improved accuracy.
It's a perfect question. I love that question. So dissecting and compartmentalizing the numbers is important, right? Obviously, so there's the cost metric, then there's the speed metric, and then there's the accuracy metric. So cost is relatively easier to manage because we just know you have to calculate what the cost per query is. The cost per query is probably going to be your North Star, and that's what we use at Planview too. So that's what we leverage because there's the cost query, a cost per query, and then there's the infrastructure. So like for example, like what's the infrastructure of 5 agents that we're using at AWS Bedrock? So there's the infrastructure piece, there's the agent piece, and then there's cost per query. But cost per query is one of the most important. Then there's obviously speed. So that's literally just speed of response. So if you're looking at, for example, the time that the user submits the prompt to the AI system to the time that the AI system finishes generating its output or answer to the user is the time that we leverage at Planview and track to make sure that we're getting as fast responses as possible to the customers. We've noticed actually, funny anecdote is Planview Copilot, we used to have an average response time of like 40 seconds. We joked internally saying like, damn, it's so slow to the point where should we just start queuing up like elevator music while the answer is generating because it's just so slow? Should we play a YouTube ad? Something, right? And so we had to move from Claude 3.5 to a faster model. Now there's obviously a little bit of limitations and constraints on like sacrificing speed for accuracy and all that stuff. So we have a toggle available in Planview Copilot now, which you can toggle between like Claude 3.5 and Haiku 3 that, makes it faster. And we've basically reduced the 40-second time to like under 15 seconds. And that's which has driven up engagement a lot. And then the third one obviously is accuracy. Now there's this metric I don't really necessarily remember off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of like quality index that a lot of AI teams in big tech use nowadays to measure the accuracy of the answers. So we do have like our own kind of like quality index that we're looking at across all the large language models, but also with just context to our product, we have scorecard testing. which means that we'll have like a list of like really popular prompts and questions that we're always going to A/B test no matter what. We're going to scorecard it from like a score of 1 to 3 or 5 or something like that. And then we're just going to measure across the board like which ones have the highest average scorecard test. So on aggregate per large language model for this given set of 10 questions or prompts. So that's something else that we do.
So you got two follow-up questions for that. The same one on that, the individual who asked is asking, how do you convince leadership? And I think it's in reference probably to changing LLM models. Let me know if I'm mistaken. Whoever asked that question.
Yeah, from our experience, leadership obviously doesn't like to get into the weeds of like, oh, this model is faster than the other. I mean, like a lot of leaders nowadays, especially those interested in AI, are incredibly technical, are incredibly like solid in understanding the specific space. However, in general, I think one of the best metrics that we also just look at in general is just like the cost per month. What we try to do with leadership is balance between like those three metrics, but only provide like the North Star metrics whenever we do present to leadership. So what I do is like we'll look at the cost per model, or rather cost per query for leadership, just to understand or like just how much we're expending on the AI infrastructure on a monthly basis. And then leadership obviously cares about engagement and adoption. One of the biggest things that I'm sure a lot of like AI tech leaders are worried about is just how good is this adoption in the first place? Like, can we actually get engagement off of AI? And so, engagement is definitely one thing that we also try to focus on, just adoption, just a number of questions that are coming from real customers on a monthly, daily, or weekly basis. So that's another thing.
And then the follow-up question was adding to the question above is which tool do you use for monitoring speed of an LLM or any model?
Yeah, so that I'd probably have to defer to our AI team because we do a lot of that. However, we do a lot of things manually too. So for example, like we'll take the API of, let's say, for example, Claude 3.5. We'll run that locally, or potentially we'll look at maybe even like a model like DeepSeek, or that's open source, right? And we'll run that locally with some sample data, dummy data, so to speak. And we'll just time it ourselves and just manually calculate it with a timer. We do that, and then we have like kind of like a internal dashboard that we measure or track a lot of these data points on. But essentially, the tooling itself allows for average response times and the tooling call times to be calculated itself as well. So it already has the data telemetry in place. So if you're using like an API, an infrastructure like AWS Bedrock or Azure AI, it's usually able to just give you the response times and the calculations for you anyways. And if not, you would just have to build your own data telemetry to calculate that tooling. But in general, that's what we do.
All right, we've got a lot of questions, and perhaps Casey, we can get your answers later on those, but we've got time for one more question. What are the biggest technical hurdles that still need to be overcome before AI copilots can truly reach their full potential for product management?
There's two that I really can think of off the top of my head. Number one is obviously just the tooling and infrastructure. And so the one biggest thing obviously is that a lot of agents nowadays, especially the agents based off of like really strong complex models like Claude 3.5, like Google Gemini, like GPT 4o, they are fast by itself in their own products. So if you use ChatGPT, you'll notice just how fast the model is. But that's because it's just the model you're playing with in an interface, like a demo interface. There's no agents involved. The moment that you involve agents that particularly do specific tasks, like doing text to SQL, performing RAG, looking at a context window of like 10 million, you know, 10 million different tokens, suddenly you're looking at higher response times and potentially even like a small chance of hallucination, just because they're large language models, right? They're always going to make hallucinations. And so we're still limited somewhat on just infrastructure, the large language models, the power of those models, but also the infrastructure that can do compute on those models. GPUs and compute is another big thing, obviously, just train and for inference on those models, which is why you see NVIDIA blowing up as one of the large tech companies in the world now, because they're one of the large players that allows for GPUs that do a lot of these AI model training and inference. So we're still somewhat limited in that aspect because that market itself is not as competitive. But I'm hoping that obviously going in forward in the future, the emergence of smaller large language models, like really small large language models that you could just run locally on your small 16 gigabyte memory machine, becomes a thing as well. And so, yeah, I think we're limited somewhat on that, but we're still also just limited on use cases. Like there are so many complicated, like very sophisticated tasks we do on a day-to-day basis, either as like just humans or PMs. And the models that we're trained to do are doing things on somewhat of a still like a non-binary fashion, but also on a binary fashion too. And so the faster we can push models to be able to like really incorporate them into our daily sophisticated lives, the better it is. A lot of us just still don't do that because we still don't think that it's capable of doing that yet because it really isn't. Let's say, for example, if you're trying to plan for a trip to, let's say, Japan or Thailand or something, suddenly, the model itself is able to create a itinerary for you. But during the trip itself, you're probably going to make so many changes. There's going to be so many last minute cancellations. There's going to be so many small nuances and challenges you're going to run into that the AI is just not going to predict, right? And so that's why there's still that hurdle where you can just try to attempt to get AI to adopt, but it's not able to do the full thing in its full capacity or replace an entire human element to it.
Thank you, Kasey. And I know we've gone a little bit over. I know we've got a few questions to get to, and we'll try to get those after the session. Thank you, Kasey, for an amazing presentation. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Our next session is going to be February 7th with Prashanth Padmanabhan. He's VP of Product Management at TalkDesk, and he's going to be talking about AI-driven automation for PMs. So very excited to have him and have you guys join us again. Just a reminder, we're super excited about our new course, which is how to build an AI agent. I've added it in the chat and we'll add it in LinkedIn as well. Course starts the week of March 10th, and would love to have you guys join us. It's taught by Corey Hill and Kai Wang, who are both PM leaders, and they teach our AI product management course, which is also the 10th cohort is starting in April, and we would love to have you there as well. Again, we'll post those in the chat in both LinkedIn and here. Thank you again, Kasey. Enjoy your weekend, everybody, and stay warm.
So my experience with the cohort was overwhelmingly positive. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I mean, look, this is what we did in 4 weeks. I mean, for me, this is like, wow. In 4 weeks class, we came up with all of this much research, this much understanding, all of it in 4 weeks. That's pretty amazing. And so firstly, how thorough the course is, how we go, you just dive in and really all the deep concepts from the technical side to all of the PM work that you have to do, all of it is covered thoroughly. The technical side especially, it's very easy to kind of gloss over it, but this ML is so technical, you absolutely have to know it on some level. The instructors are very supportive. Kai is a fantastic instructor. Bijan is always available for help. He wants to help you push your career forward, learn as much as possible. Just become a great AI PM. And that's I two hearty thumbs up.